it took a lot of time, and a couple songs got nixed, a couple songs didn't make it, and I spent quite a long time shaping them, and then finally figuring out that the first song is sort of like a natural introduction, the way that it sort of builds, the first track, Trafalgar Square. And so so that was how it kind of like started, and it's a tricky one to sequence because of all the like stylistic changes and stuff. But basically you just have to sort of meditate, on it, and you start to see the picture. Well, it's sort of this surreal state that I can sort of get myself into when I sort of let things come and come to mind, and I trust that they're going to be cool, by the end, instead of second guessing everything, every thought that you have, like, oh, that sucks. Well, maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe I should say this here, you know what I mean? So that was kind of the vibe there. But then, yeah, it's cool to put in little Beatle references and shit, and Sgt. Pepper references, and Trafalgar Square. It's like such a British place, mate. It's just so funny, but it's, I have no idea why I have a song that's even called that. It makes no fucking sense. And that was a long-term relationship with the song, and like developing this thing at the piano that I would sit and play this sort of a classical vibe. If you actually sit down and play it on the piano the way that it was first composed, which was really long, just only the piano, and it was very slow and very long. And like I actually played it once for Roger Waters to see what he thought about it, and he goes, I said, this thing is too long, right? It's just too long. He goes, no, like he goes, maybe you should make it twice as long or whatever. And I was just like, okay. And then it's just a dirge, and so at some point, like me, I had the vision for that to be this huge, like fucking orchestral tour de force. I was going to have alto flutes and fucking oboes and bassoons and stuff, blah, blah, blah. But then in the end, I decided to condense it down to just sort of like a piano trio. So then that's just cut with the band, like the tracking band, which was sort of like a trio, and myself on the piano. And it turned in from this big grandiose like piano piece into sort of like a drum groove, so. And it's a song about me. It's called Me, so it's got a I think that not that it's got to be good or something, but it's got to be me. It has to have many little things in it that have to do with specifically me, and it does. Well, that's where that's me going into thrift stores since I was a kid, and my grandfather used to have a thrift store that was a part of the church like conglomeration that he worked for. And I was in thrift stores yesterday here in this town. I go to them everywhere. I was just in one up here on the road, the Coors boutique or whatever, Road Coors or whatever it's called. So I go to them. So one day, instead of the great gig in the sky for somebody, I'm going to have to be in the Gold Salvation Army.
We are traveling on through the midnight. We are holding our hearts, we are in flight. And our shoes, they might as well be nails. And our minds play 1,000 pretty songs for us.
That was sort of like a journey, a sonic journey that's sort of like designed for you to like drive to or something, that was the way I was thinking. It's got that beat, sort of like that driving beat, sort of like motoric in a way, a little bit of like a Kraut situation, but and just many tracks, like 100 or so, on the screen, and many there's like 7 synthesizers in there. There's several pianos. There's drum machines, real drums. There's cymbals. There's tambourines. There's many vocals. There's a lot of shit kind of hidden in that song. And then it's got sort of like the nod, like sort of like the Jerry Garcia tone and stuff on the guitar and stuff, which I wanted to kind of put that in there as sort of something to juxtapose the sort of that late 80s synthy vibe that it has, so yeah. And that song kind of started on just the guitar, so that's what the version I played of it just this afternoon was like that. So that song, it kind of started as sort of like a folky.
Can you roll, babe? Here's some papers and grass. Yes, sky. And besides, we've got this old town roam around it. And they've overdubbed our voices in French.
Well, that would be sort of like the sort of like the dream, right? To be like in some sort of like romantic 60s French film or something, cruising through California, cruising through Beverly Hills, cruising, that's what the visual is. And and I wanted to turn a phrase like that, like traveling over the midnight. I was like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? But it's sort of like a mystical, fantastical thing to do. Overdubbed in French, over the midnight somewhere, whatever that means. And you're cruising through the streets of LA, and you get to see some of the like iconic spots, and you get to go to the Beverly Hills hotel, to the Polo Lounge. It talks about that. You look so pretty in the polo. It's the Polo Lounge, but you're smashing in pink. So you're dressed in pink. You're at the Beverly Hills Hotel, drinking a margarita. Blah blah blah.
There is a garden in the expanse of your mind. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the harvest will reap for you in due time.
That one was late in the game. I needed that song. I was sitting there like halfway through the session, or maybe even more than halfway through, at the piano. I was like, what do I not have yet? What kind of song do I need? And I needed something fast like that, something like with tempo, and then something that was positive, that was purely positive. And so that song is one of those things where it just came out and like really fast, which is pretty rare actually for me. But so, when you hear the story that people always say, like, like me, I wrote a day in the life in 15 minutes or whatever, that kind of thing. And so, but that was kind of like that. That song for me was like that. It just sort of flowed out within a day or two, So, and then that version is kind of incredible. Is that version is the first time it was ever done, first time it was ever played. So it's the first take, yeah. And the drummer, for example, Joey, if you listen to only the drum take, like, which we used to do at the time we were finishing the record, we would listen to just the drums, on that song, and the drum take is fucking incredible. He's like, it's like it's some deep, like fucking LA session. He's doing like a Jim Gordon, like Hal Blaine, like guys that can show up, write a chart, hear the song once, and boom, it's like perfect. Because in that day there's a fucking orchestra there. Each take is very expensive because of everybody being paid for the day and blah blah blah. So you have to be. So that's kind of the way that song was done. And it was the first time that I sang it too. Yeah, and I had to go back and double myself, and then there were some, because I never sang it really, so there was some pitchy stuff that was kind of a little bit fucked up, and I was playing the guitar at the same time with that track. So I was, if you listen to it really, really, really closely, I kind of had to fix. Like, some of this, like there's like, there are some punch ins and stuff, on the vocal to like fix some like bad notes and stuff. But I don't think for the most part it sort of is like the first take. I mean, as far as like the vocal is concerned too, but the band and stuff is like 100% the first take.
There's a cherry on top tonight for men who look like Jesus tonight. If you play your cards right, you can be with the Son of God tonight.
Yeah, that's another. That's a very sad track, but that's another song that takes you through the city, down the boulevard, which is it's a very very iconic spot. And it goes all the way, out to the beach. It's a very long drive, and you get to see basically the whole town, So, and that song is just, it's about many, many nights I would spend in my Porsche. I have an old Porsche, driving it around the city, mostly just by myself, just sort of, I like to drive around and, when it's dark there, because that's when the traffic has died down. And I like to just observe, like the town and what the hell is going on. It signifies the city, that town, which I've been in for so long. It's the Strip, it was the '60s. It was the whiskey, and it was the Roxy, it was Billboard Live or whatever in the '90s, which is kind of shitty. It was the Viper Room. It was, it's been so many things, that street, and as it continues out, and it dumps into the sea. Then it turns into Malibu and all this, and then you're there, which is a whole other thing. And that street is is sort of like one of the main, it's like a symbolic, artery, of like the town.
Rebels, we are out in space. At the moment we're weightless, this feeling will last as long as we lie. Charming, the views as we orbit the earth, but it is constantly changing. It's living with pain, it's telling us this.
That was started and written and demoed with a group of some of these songs, where I went out to Joshua Tree and I stayed in this incredible spot that this guy had made, and he was like this a sculptor that was an understudy of Frank Lloyd Wright, and he made this big weird stone house out there, and he had recently died, this guy, and so the house was not for sale, and it was not yet on Airbnb, let's say. So it was just, he had just died. So I talked to a friend who goes, well, there's a place that you can stay, that they're trying to fix it up to put it on Airbnb, blah, blah, blah. So I called him and I stayed there, and I brought a studio in my car. I brought drums and bass and amps and a bunch of stuff there. So I was there for 2 weeks in this guy's house, and the guy was a sculptor. And the stuff was all there still, in the guy's house. So I sort of got inside his, this guy's vibe, And he was a really, really, really interesting dude. And so, basically, that song kind of came about, in a way I'm thinking about, sort of like an ode in a way, like to Crazy Horse, which I did some gigs with, and such a great band, and their whole thing on stage was so fucking cool. And so I'm kind of I'm giving it some of that kind of vibe, and that big like disgusting sounding fuzz. And that was actually the first time that was done, and that was done out there on the demos. That all the guitar that you hear between the verses, you know, like the slide stuff, the disgusting slide, that was all done the first time that I demoed the song and I played that, and so I kept that all the way through till the end, and so we extracted it from a garage band where I was doing these little dumb little fucking demos, and we took it and time stretched it and made it work, you know, over the new track. And so that was something else that I really feels really strongly about, being, you know, going to great lengths to preserve your first thing that you played, or the first thing you sang, or what came to mind, because a lot of times that can be like the strongest thing that you'll play, because when you play it the second time, you know, or third or fourth time, you're starting to learn a part, and you're starting to learn a song or something like that. But there's only that one time that you're like, this is it. This is my first time to feel it, you know. So that's what that song has, that. And so yeah, and then we re-amplified it and did some of my like secret fuzz in the studio stuff to get it sounding like that.
Falsetto folk is pitchfork at your side. Your tunes, they will be forgotten.
That could be like a devil, you know. It could be like a sort of like a satanic like folk singer, you know. Or you know, it could be you know, like little newfangled folkies that Pitchfork.com is obsessed with or something, maybe. I'm just throwing it out there, you know. You know, so that's kind of like, you know, falsetto folkies, pitchfork on your side, pitchfork by your side. Yeah, it says your tunes, they will be forgotten way out, way out in the desert. There's nowhere to hide, you know, basically, because you can't. That's just talking about it. That was when I was out there, and it was, you know, I mean, the sun just bakes you all day, and there's nowhere to go, you know, like you're just stuck in it, you know, so. But that's another sad one, a very, very longing sort of like ballad. That the working title of that was like on my phone or whatever, was like the prettiest thing on the album or something like that, you know, like those chords. And then yeah, that one, you know, that's a song about it's just from a text that I got, like from an ex that was like, I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, she was on a modeling job, you know, at like 10 in the morning or whatever, on set, you know, at some random modeling thing. And I was like, what are you doing? She's like, exactly that, like a 49. Yeah, so that was her response. And I was like, I wrote that down or something. I was like, that's going to be a song. And I somehow it segued into a song. And yeah, and that one's got the vocals by your boy Father John Misty on there, which gives it a cool vibe. And but yeah, that's for me, that's one of the best sort of like complete things like that I've ever done, you know, that particular song. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good one to play on the gigs too. It always feels like it's powerful. That was started out as just a funny song, like a joke song that I was writing on tour. I was doing like a tour 2014, 2006, maybe 15, and I was yeah, it was just written about a friend of mine, you know, and that's her name, and I was like talking to her, and I was like, what's your name? What's your full name again? You know, she's so British, you know, and she's like, Miriam Theodosia Montague the Third, and I'm like, you get a song, like you know, like. So I sort of started it as a joke in the van, And then there was kind of something there, you know. I was like, this is actually kind of cool. And I would sit at the piano and play da 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 da, da, you know. And it was just me sort of trying to like a channel, you know, something from that town, from that time, you know. And so I went to the ends of the earth to make it sound like, you know, it's got that sort of really like brash, sort of like, you know, deep in the studio Brit vibe, you know. And then I got a friend of mine, an old friend that I used to play jazz with, and he plays a saxophone on it there in the middle, and he also plays on me. But yeah, so that was, you know, I'm a big fan of saxophone and jazz, and it's got a lot to do with my past. So I had to make sure that, you know, like originally we were trying to get Wayne Shorter and then, you know, all these folks to be involved, and we also tried for Charles Lloyd, you know, the legendary sax player, and you know, it's kind of tough to convince dudes like that to come play on this weird like fucking indie dude's got a song, can you come please? And they're just like, who? Like, what are you talking about? But then I was like forget that. This Saxon needs to be from somebody that's a friend of mine, somebody that I have a bond with in some way. So I called this guy from my town, from my hometown back in North Carolina, and I was like, if I send you some tracks, will you play on it? And he's like, sure. And so that's what, you know, that's what that is. It would be difficult for me to just have a stranger come and sort of like wax poetic, you know, on one of my songs. I would be difficult. I would have to shape some of it, you know. But then when it's somebody that you trust like that, like for example, like playing on this album is the great pedal steel player Greg Leisz, who I fell in love with when I was a kid, because listening to him play with people like Katie Lang and stuff like that, and he's the guy. He's like a melodic fucking genius, you know. So he comes in and I'm like, yes, just like go for it. And then he puts down the right stuff, you know. So it's got to be somebody that you trust. It starts out heartfelt hipster folk bots, and those are these young musicians I met in London who were very, very good, and they were playing like this heartfelt folk fingerpicky stuff, and they knew my songs and they sang them back to me, and they could play them and sing them, and they were singing Josh's songs and stuff. And it was just at a party like one night, but they were good. They were great, and I was like, but there was something about it was so heartfelt. It was different. It would never fly in the States to be just like, you know, it's like if you were to once again be at Newport in 1963, and you're like, you know, this land is your land or something, but you're like, it's real, it's heartfelt, you know. And I was like, wow, that's doesn't happen back in the States, you know, like folk music being like heartfelt, sort of like the lineage being like sort of like maybe like a British popular folk, like, I don't know, Mumford, you know, I don't know, some of that kind of stuff. So this was sort of like a younger version maybe, and I was checking it out. So that's what I called them, and I could and so I was envisioning them like squatting in these like apartments and these pads that they didn't even fucking pay for, because they're literally like folk bots that are like busking and, you know, on the in the tube and stuff. So I just made up a place called Jamaican Tower, and so they're supposed to be squatting under there, and they're plugging into like to dirty power is what I'm talking about there, which is in Britain, you know, they call it like the mains power, you know, it's like in the wall when you plug in like your amplifier into mains power, mate, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I was like plugging into dirty power. I think that it is because you know, a sort of like a topical love song, a topical song of politic, you know, a topical now, like it would be the most dark like depressing fucking album that you would ever, and no one would care to hear it, you know, if I were to sort of like comment on that kind of thing. Or, you know, just I'm a little bit pretty much fucking over that sort of like the tropes and formulaic way of sitting down with a song and starting, and, you know, you and me and me and you, and, you know, I mean, you know, take the car to the store. Don't you want some more? About, I'm just like, I have no interest in those kind of songs. Like, I would rather not sing. I would rather like compose completely completely fucking instrumental, songs than to be singing that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So and I do like to search somewhere to find something that is surreal,
Yeah.
But it has to be mixed with something that's real too, So that's sort of like the tricky part. Yeah, that was the one that like started the whole thing off, and it was the first song I did at the beginning of the thing, and I wasn't sure what the sound, what the album was going to be, what it was going to sound like, and so as a stroke of luck, my friend, the great Laraji came to town, and he comes over sometimes when he's in town. He doesn't come to town much, but so he came through my studio, and we tracked some stuff that day, and then I said, I have a song that I maybe is going to be something. Let's, would you be down to, like to try it? And he's like, yeah, let's try it. So I put down, at this time, the song it was just sort of like a sketch. So I put down the piano that you hear, and I put down like a little drum machine beat, and then he did all the rest of that stuff, just boom, like that. Like, he played the zither. iPad, and he did like all the singing and chanting just right there, in the control room. And when all that was said and done, I was like, wow, this is a sound, and this is a really cool sound. That's something that I don't think I've ever heard this, this sound, of all these things. And so yeah, basically we had to protect that song, like the whole process, from being changed. And to, basically, there were some times that I tried to add some things on it. I put like guitar, I put Lana, she came and sang on it, and she would sing it in the same places as him. And it was quite cool, and I really tried to make that work. But then I was like, the song should always be that first thing. And I used that sort of like prototype for Midnight. It's the same thing, the same beat, the same drum machine, the same cymbals, the same bass, so.
I'm living with the fear of God every single day. I'm living with myself, I know not enough of whom I speak.
That's another sort of like dark song about the city and rolling around that town. And at the time I was a single in Los Angeles, which can be so frustrating. You're just like going on dates and these folks in this town, and you're just like, oh my God, this place is disgusting. And but then you're with yourself each night, maybe, and sitting in my studio, listening like to Springsteen or something, and I still pump that quite a lot. I listen like to Tunnel of Love and stuff like, and so I was sort of thinking about that and those kind of vibes, and that's sort of, I think you can hear some of that on that song. But anyway, and then when it comes to the chorus, suddenly it opens up to like the sunshine and stuff. So that's the vibe there.
Hey, look, these aviators, man, they completely cover my eyes. Sailing on the air sometimes.
Because on purpose we put this big kind of like a major chord, right? That's like a huge like, it makes you feel something like the sun is out, So. That was a song that started out as a weird little, I turned the tape backwards on the machine, and then I heard something in the backwards track, which was that or whatever, and so I used that as sort of like the basis, and it was sort of like an experiment on a way to sort of, for me, sort of like to deconstruct, you know, like a song, and not necessarily have the conventional chords and you know, that song's just kind of like a mantra, you know, that just goes, you know, sort of in the same key like the whole time. And then speaking of like talk or something, then it does that section, you know, where it's sort of like that's sort of like my, in a way, thinking of like, yeah, like a that band. And there's a thing about the Hammond that's got this really sort of ethereal sound, so that's, you know, that's there. But that's me on the drums on that, and I tried to get some folks in to play drums on it, but it never really worked, you know, as it didn't work as good as, you know, the first version. And but yeah, and that's another sort of song of like, it's a way of, you know, if you can express some of that kind of like pain and stuff, maybe you can sort of get it outside, you know, like the body. And so that was what that song, you know, is about. Some people, yeah, they compare it maybe like to Peter Gabriel or something, is what people have said to me. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know. So yeah, and I mean, I see it more as like a Nine Inch Nails, like Ministry vibe or something, which, you know, no one would expect that from the Canyon like folky dude, you know. So, but yeah, and there's a shaker of like a spice jar, then you can hear it in there, barely. It's like this like spice that we're shaking, like, and there's this little tiny amplifier that I have that's like exploding the whole time. It's going, so it's like this random tiny little explosion thing. It's going, you know, there's a lot of shit in that song. That was a funky little country birdsian song that I wrote in the sessions out in the desert. And something about that little riff, I just kind of digged it, you know. So I kind of sort of made a point to sort of like to see that song through. And when my buddy Jeff Ratiti put down the weird like synth stuff that's on that weird like wow, 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 you know, the weird like synthesizer like freak out, I was gone upstairs and I came back down and he had done that, you know, and it was on the track, and I was like, that's amazing. I was like, that must stay, you know. It's like you know, it's like a weird sort of like juxtaposition of something completely strange, you know, with that song. I thought was cool, you know, because it is sort of a straight sort of like little sort of like Southern California country vibe, you know. And then we got Greg on the pedal steel, and he smashed it, you know. He sounds so good on it. And then and that drum freak out at the end was something that I wanted to put on like the album. Like that was me going up to the drums and just, you know, getting out some demons and shit like that, which I thought that the album needed a place where it went like to fire, you know, things just fucking caught on fire, and it went to that place. So that's what I did there. That's why it's there. Has nothing to do with the song or the next song. It has to do with just a point on the album that just goes, that it starts to rise into fucking chaos, you know. So that's that, da, 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 you know, it's me just freaking out on the drums. The Mulholland Queen, yeah, exactly. That was a thing I was sitting there and playing on the piano, just, you know, as a little exercise on piano, and it was another sort of like really pretty thing that I was like, you know, what can I put as like the bookend on the album? And I tried it, or I was thinking about it the whole time. I was like, that should be the last song. I should do it, and I couldn't exactly get to the point where I could basically pull it off, and I didn't have all the words, you know, for the end yet. And then one night I just was there, just like completely by myself, and was just like this is going to be the night to do it. You know, this is the time to do it. And so I just did some takes, you know, of it, and went back downstairs, and I was like, well, that's basically it. It's done now, you know, finally. Because it was a song that I was really thinking about like the whole time, and I was like, it's got to be this really like expressive thing, and so yeah, and then we put on the strings and stuff, which is the best, you know, probably sort of like the pinnacle, you know, of the song is that part where the strings come in and stuff, and yeah, it was basically like sort of one more of the, you know, sort of like an ode like to the city, you know, and like that street, because that's the street that's sort of on it sort of runs like a ridge of the whole town, where you can sort of like see both like the valley side, you know, and the sort of like the south side of the town, and it goes all the way out, you know. It's a giant road, and it's a fun road to drive your car on fast and shit like that, which folks do all the time there, and stuff like that. But yeah, so it was basically like you know, that was sort of like the sort of like the sweetness that I was trying to, you know, like express as the last song, you know, and it's a bit sad too, so. I am actually. I've been doing some krautrock-ian kind of stuff, which has been fun, you know, with like the synthesizers, and going back and forth with a friend of mine in Berlin, who does like some contributions to these songs and stuff, and sort of like some speaking parts and stuff. So I've been doing a little bit of that. But as of now, I've been working on some sort of like acoustic folky stuff, so that sort of more in line with probably like the Gentle Spirit type of vibe, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm up to.
They hardened the stone on the valley of the silver. Said I'm writing you now from the valley of the silver. Writing you now from the valley of the silver. The silver moon. The silver moon.